My name is Betsy Fordyce. I'm here in the Hotchkiss Chapel at Bellefontaine Cemetery to tell you a little about my great-grandfather Samuel Wesley Fordyce, who lived from 1840 to 1919. Carol Shepley, in her book on the history of Bellefontaine, calls him a mover and shaker. He has also been referred to as an industrialist and a capitalist. He's known predominantly for building railroads, 24,000 miles according to one source. But he was also involved in a variety of businesses and in the democratic politics of his day. I'd like to dedicate this short video to another great-grandchild, Ike Fordyce, who died recently on St. Valentine's Day in Austin, Texas, at nearly 85 years of age. Like our mutual great-grandfather, Ike was multi-talented and multifaceted. He was a rancher, polo player, pilot, photographer, writer, and my favorite cousin. To appreciate the goals and values of Samuel Wesley Fordyce, it's necessary to understand the time in which he lived. The great experiment of our democracy was not even 60 years old, and the U.S. population was less than 18 million when he was born in 1840. Americans were pushing west, many believing in manifest destiny, the doctrine that settlement by European immigrants of the entire continent of North America was not only justified, but inevitable. The acknowledged stakeholders were white males. The lack of inclusion of Native Americans, African Americans, and women has led to much suffering and violence throughout our history. Samuel Wesley Fordyce was both a man of his time and a visionary, whose intention was to unite the country through labor and trade. Like many people who have related successfully to the world in which they lived, Sam experienced what mythologist Joseph Campbell called the hero's journey. That is to say, he met many obstacles in his life, which instead of defeating him, transformed him into a better man. His life began in the small town of Senecaville, Ohio. He was one of 11 children, 5 of whom died under the age of 5. Making Sam the oldest son. His father's first wife and child had previously died in childbirth in Pennsylvania. Sam's father, a religious Methodist, one of 3 merchants in the town, was a stern taskmaster. Expecting his son to follow what he called the straight path, he made Sam work alongside him after school instead of allowing him to play with the other boys. Despite getting into some good-natured trouble along the way, Sam learned from his father the value of hard work and honest business practices. After graduating from college in northern Illinois, he returned to Ohio and got a low-level job in a train station. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, Sam, just 21 years old, enlisted in the Union Army as a private. Anti-slavery and pro-union, he nevertheless respected the Confederacy's right to defend its beliefs. In his autobiography, he mentions capturing a Confederate soldier who had left his platoon without permission to visit his fiancée one last time. Sam and another officer dressed the Confederate soldier in a Union uniform, giving him his Confederate uniform to change into, and escorted him out of the Union camp on horseback. Thus, the soldier was able to return to his unit without being labeled a deserter. During the fighting, Sam was wounded twice. He was captured 3 times, recaptured twice, and escaped once. Towards the end of the war, he contracted a severe case of malaria and had to resign his commission. By this time, Sam had shown such competency and initiative that he had been promoted from private to lieutenant to captain to assistant inspector general of cavalry in the Army of the Cumberland. The war was over in 1865, leaving the North in chaos and the South in ruins. 25-year-old Sam set his sights on reconstructing the South. Moving to Huntsville, Alabama, where he had fought for the Union, he fell in love with and married Susan Chaddock, the daughter of a Confederate colonel. Sam established a successful bank with a partner who was better at saying no than he was. In his autobiography, Sam recalls that he avoided a run on the bank by promising that $1 million was coming from New York, when in fact only $100,000 was on its way. If the townspeople had not trusted his word, Sam said, he would have had to find a way to make good on his promise. Over time, Sam got better at making difficult business decisions, but banking didn't hold his attention because, as he pointed out, his clients preferred living off the interest of their money to building something with it. Still suffering from his war wounds and repeated bouts of malaria, Sam, 6 feet tall and usually weighing 175 pounds, went down to 125. Friends carried him on a cot to Hot Springs, Arkansas, in hopes the mineral waters would heal him. Eventually, Sam's health was restored, and since he felt he owed his life to the hot springs, he decided to move his family there. Seeing the potential of the area, he soon set about building up the town. In cooperation with others, he built hotels, an opera house, water, gas, and electrical works, roads, and a street railway system. He influenced the erection of the Army-Navy Hospital, and envisioning a national park system, convinced President Grant to set aside land for the creation of Hot Springs National Park. Today, the visitor center to the park is the restored Fordyce Bathhouse. Continuing his efforts to expand trade, Sam spent the 1880s, 90s, and the beginning of the 20th century supervising the construction, implementation, and management of railroads throughout the South and Southwest. At this point, he relocated to the Central West End in St. Louis, still keeping his home outside of Hot Springs, which he called the cabin, and where he said he felt close to nature. He persevered through numerous difficulties for 16 years to construct the St. Louis Southwestern Railway. He went on to become president, vice president, and treasurer of numerous other railroads. On a number of occasions, Sam took over when a railroad went into receivership, reorganizing it and cutting costs to make it profitable again. While strikes occurred on other railroads, Sam's employees never struck because they always viewed him as fair and even-handed. In fact, his ability as an executive was so widely recognized that the railroads unanimously elected him chairman of the executive board of the Southwestern Traffic Association. Known never to carry a gun, Sam told a story about being robbed at gunpoint on an annual inspection tour of one of his railroads. Although the men wore masks, Sam recognized the voice of one of the robbers as that of a former employee named Shang Doland. Sam, by that time called Colonel as an honorific, remarked, "Shang, aren't you ashamed of yourself to come over on the Cotton Belt and try to rob a road as poor as this one? Don't you know that nobody with any money ever rides on the Cotton Belt? Why don't you go hold up a rich road like the Iron Mountain?" The bandit was floored. He pulled off his mask and extended his hand, saying, "Excuse me, Colonel, if I'd known this was your special, I never would have held it up. I'll go out and stop the boys and let you go." Besides railroads, Sam had his hand in numerous businesses which benefited the development of St. Louis and the surrounding region. With a syndicate, he founded St. Louis Union Trust, Laclede Light and Power Company, the Jefferson Hotel Company, and the St. Louis Public Library. He was director of the American Rio Grande Land and Irrigation Company of Texas, operating the largest irrigation canal system in the U.S., and he was president of the Houston Oil Company. Although active in Democratic politics and often a delegate to the Democratic Convention, Sam was more interested in regional development than in holding public office. He did, however, advise several presidents, including Grant, Hayes, Harrison, and McKinley. The life of Sam Fordyce followed the trajectory of a pioneer. His people were immigrants from Scotland who arrived before the Revolutionary War. They fought for independence from Great Britain and pushed west from New Jersey to Pennsylvania to Ohio, generation by generation, as the frontier opened up. The historian Frederick Jackson Turner described the traits of the frontiersmen as strength combined with acuteness and inquisitiveness, that practical and inventive turn of mind, quick to find expedients, restless energy, dominant individualism, and an exuberance that comes with freedom. Those were certainly traits of my great-grandfather. One St. Louis newspaper said of him, "It was as a nation builder, a far-sighted financier, and an individual with infectious enthusiasm that he gained his greatest prominence. He was famous as a steadfast friend, who found friends in every class of society and treated them all equally. He judged men not by their wealth, but by their worth." My great-grandfather was a unifier and a connector, intent on creating a better world. He was confident, charming, a bit pugnacious, and quite progressive. Yes, he was a man of his time, but I'd like to think that given the changing nature of our democracy, if he were alive today, Sam Fordyce would apply his good character, prodigious intelligence, and unflagging energy towards solving our current problems of social injustice and economic inequality. Of course, that's speculation on my part, and it's possible that I'm just a little bit biased. Thank you.